Hi everyone, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles, a series of books and videos on American history as seen through the lives of the presidents of the United States. This episode is from the life of Grover Cleveland, and the focus is an extended interregnum. The year is 1888. It's an election year, and it's going to be a tough race for Grover Cleveland. He had been a reform president. That meant he was pushing things up against some pretty tough obstacles, and there were plenty of folks who were not happy with his direction, particularly on topics like the currency and the tariff. He wasn't going to change, but it was going to make re-election challenging. He did get the nomination, of course, on the first ballot at the St. Louis Exposition and Music Hall when the Democrats got together in June of 1888 for their national campaign convention. And they nominated a bit of a surprise for the vice presidency. Allen Thurman of Ohio is a long-standing party leader, but he's 75 years old. He'd been out of office for 8 years, but nevertheless, he was now the number 2 on the ticket. What about the Republicans? A lot of eyes were on James Blaine, the person that Grover Cleveland had beaten just 4 years before, and he had been up for the nomination a couple of times before that. Maybe he's going to come around again. But Blaine actually took himself out of the race early in the year. He was vacationing in Europe, sent a note back to the party saying, "I'm not running." And there was actually a lot that didn't believe him. They thought he might just be playing coy. So he heard this. He sent a second letter back saying, "No kidding, I'm not running." And that opened it up for the Republicans. 18 different candidates would get votes when they got together for their national convention. John Sherman of Ohio had wanted to be president for a couple of decades, former Treasury Secretary, former senator. He was up first with 229 votes on that first ballot for the Republicans, but he didn't have enough momentum to get to a majority. So a couple of other favorite sons from swing states were put forward. Chauncey Depew from New York, Walter Gresham from Indiana, but neither of them had sufficient momentum either. It was a different Hoosier, a former senator from Indiana, Benjamin Harrison, the former Union general. He was put forward. He's the grandson of the 9th president of the United States, William Henry Harrison. Benjamin Harrison got the nomination from the Republicans, and he was really all about one thing: protection, high tariff. That's what he stood for. That's what he was running on. Complete opposite of Grover Cleveland. Now, the Republicans were aggressive in this campaign. They were well organized and well funded. A lot of the pro-tariff lobby supporting with cash the Republican Party in the campaign. Harrison himself, it was a very quiet campaign, a front porch campaign at his home in Indianapolis, but his surrogates were out there pushing the topic of protection and really slamming what the Democrats would do if Cleveland got another 4 years in the White House. As for the Democrats, well, they were not nearly as well organized. Cleveland himself would not campaign. He thought that was inappropriate for an incumbent president, and he told his cabinet not to campaign either. And the party was divided on some of these key topics, like the currency and the tariff. It was hard to get a unified front for the Democrats. The key to this all, not surprisingly, was New York, Cleveland's home state. It always seemed to be decisive with the most votes in the Electoral College. And this time around, Cleveland was being pushed to endorse the man who had taken over for him as the governor of New York 4 years before, and that's David Hill. David Hill had succeeded Cleveland in the governor's office, and frankly, Cleveland couldn't stand his politics because Hill was backsliding into the old way of doing business, aligning himself with the political machines like Tammany Hall, using patronage, counter to civil service reform. This was all anathema to Grover Cleveland, and no matter how much he was pushed to go endorse Hill for his re-election for governor, Cleveland would not do it. And it probably made a difference because in the fall campaign, Hill won re-election in New York by about 20,000 votes. Grover Cleveland lost his home state to Benjamin Harrison by about 15,000 votes. A lot of Hill's supporters clearly were unwilling to check the box in favor of Cleveland, and it was decisive. Cleveland won the overall popular vote nationally by about 100,000 votes, but that didn't mean much because he lost New York. He lost the Electoral College to Harrison to the tune of 233 to 168, and with that, he lost the presidency. Well, he still had 4 more months to go, and it was fairly peaceful. Maybe some of the pressure was ratcheted down, but Grover Cleveland wasn't going to go out quietly. He still had some things to say, and he said them in his final message to Congress in December of 1888, talking about labor relations, talking about the currency, and talking about the tariff, the need to bring the tariff down. He told Congress, "The communism of combined wealth and capital, the outgrowth of overweening cupidity and selfishness, which insidiously seriously undermines the justice and integrity of free institutions is not less dangerous than the communism of oppressed poverty and toil, which, exasperated by injustice and discontent, attacks with wild disorder the citadel of rule. This is his advocacy. It's probably going to fall on deaf ears, though, with the next administration that was about to come in, because they had just run on a high protective platform. No regrets for Grover Cleveland. He had gone in as a reformer. That was intent. That's how he acted as president of the United States, and he was proud of that, as he told the New York Times and the Baltimore Sun in his final interview as he was leaving the presidency. The animating spirit of the administration was administrative reform. Not exclusive attention to any one phase of improvement in that service, but a wholesale ventilation and stirring up of all the branches of that service. The lopping off of useless limbs, the removal of the dead wood, and such a renewal of the activity by the introduction of new blood as the necessities of the service should demand. He was proud of his accomplishments. Was he ever going to get back in politics? Well, at the time he wasn't saying, but somebody was. His new bride, Frances Cleveland, she had an opinion on the matter, came through on Inauguration Day in a conversation with Jerry Smith, the head butler at the White House, in which case Frances Cleveland said, "Now, Jerry, I want you to take good care of all the furniture and ornaments of the house, for I want to find everything just as it is now when we come back again." Smith replied, "Come back again?" "Yes," Mrs. Cleveland responded. "We're coming back just 4 years from today." An optimistic tone for Frances Cleveland. Not sure what Grover Cleveland felt, at least at this time. The question was, where would they go? What are they going to go do? One thing for sure was he wasn't going back to Buffalo, his former hometown he was estranged from. Did not go well when he became governor. He was at odds with a lot of his former friends, and then when he ran for president, it kind of got even worse. He was not going back to Buffalo. He didn't really have to work. He'd made good money, pocketing some of his presidential salary into the bank. He had also sold Oakview, their second home in the D.C. area, for a tidy profit. So he didn't really need to work, but he wanted to. He wanted to contribute. So he decided to move to New York City, sign on with one of the big law firms, Banks, Stetson, Tracy, and McVeigh, where he would serve of counsel, not become a partner, not fully enmeshed, but he'd be of counsel. He'd pick and choose his own cases. He'd work mostly behind the scenes. He would still certainly do all his briefs in his own hand, just like he always did. But this was not going to be all-consuming, because he also wanted to relax, to spend time in the outdoors that he loved so much, hunting and fishing. He didn't really understand why others didn't appreciate this pastime like he did so much. Later on in life, he would write a book, Fishing and Shooting Sketches, which is a bunch of essays about his love of the great outdoors, hunting and fishing in particular, but also that he was sorry for those who couldn't appreciate these great pastimes. He wrote, "I sadly reflected how their dispositions might have been sweetened and their lives made happier if they had yielded something to the particular type of frivolity which they deplored." Didn't understand it, and he was going to do as much hunting and fishing as he could. A lot of times with friends, they were taking trips to Cape Cod. In fact, they bought their own summer retreat. It's called Gray Gables near Buzzards Bay. This was all the relaxing side of things, but not the biggest change for the Clevelands on the personal front. That came on October 3rd of 1891 when Grover Cleveland became a father for the first time at the age of 54. His wife Frances gave birth to baby Ruth. And he said in a letter to his friend Shan Bissell, whose wife was also expecting, that I, who have just entered the real world and seen a small child more of value than I have ever called my own before, who puts aside as hardly worth a thought all that has gone before, fame, honor, place, everything. His world had very much changed for the better, but it wasn't just his world. This, for some reason, wasn't just a Cleveland baby. It was a national baby. The American people really rallied around Frances and baby Ruth, such that a candy maker came out with a candy. The Baby Ruth that we still see today was not named for a baseball player by a similar name who came around a couple of decades later. The Baby Ruth, that was named for Ruth Cleveland when she was born in 1891. The biggest challenge? Privacy. The press was everywhere trying to take pictures of that baby because it was so popular across the country. What about politics? The midterms were rolling around in 1890, and Cleveland decided to start writing a few more letters and expressing his discontent with what was going on under his successor, Benjamin Harrison. He decried the profligate spending of this administration. It was called the Billion-Dollar Congress because for the first time, Congress approved appropriations in 1 year over $1 billion. They also passed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which went beyond the Bland-Allison Act to buy even more silver. Again, anathema to Grover Cleveland. And then there was the tariff. The McKinley Tariff, named for William McKinley, the highest protective tariff ever in American history. All of this was going in the wrong direction, according to Grover Cleveland, and he decided to become public with that statement. Jackson Day Dinner, Young Men's Democratic Association of Philadelphia, January 8, 1891, in a speech that he called The Principles of True Democracy. He leveled his specific charges against the Harrison administration. When we see the extravagance of public expenditure fast reaching the point of reckless waste and the undeserved distribution of public money debauching its recipients, we will remember that economy in the public expense is an important article in the true democratic faith. He was critical of Harrison. He was espousing his own political ideology, and many thought with that speech he was launching a re-election campaign. Now, there were others who also wanted the Democratic nomination, including David Hill, the governor of New York. But once Cleveland really started to express his interest, this was going to be pretty clearly his. He had William Whitney, his former Navy secretary, kind of running his campaign, representing him at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Cleveland got the nomination on the first ballot, 617 votes. Hill was a distant second at 114. Bit of an interesting choice again for VP. Adlai Stevenson of Illinois. Why interesting? Because he was pro-silver, very much not the camp of Grover Cleveland, but they kind of felt they maybe balanced the ticket a little bit. This was a stark choice for the electorate. You've got bimetallism and protectionism from the Republicans and Harrison. You've got the gold standard and low tariff for the Democrats and Grover Cleveland. Pretty stark. A new dynamic in this race, there were 6 new states came into the country under Benjamin Harrison. That was 19 new votes in the Electoral College. They were mostly out west, so this was going to be potentially a concern for the pro-silver folks. But New York was always going to be key, and here an interesting clash occurred between Cleveland and some of the power brokers in the state of New York. They wanted something to support him this time. Remember, he didn't get their support in the last election. This time, what would Cleveland give them? Would he give them patronage and opportunities? Well, Cleveland wasn't typically a deal maker, but he did agree to a dinner with some of these leaders September 8, 1892 at the Victoria Hotel in New York City. They had their dinner. Afterwards, they put it aside and got down to business, and it was pretty blunt. The machine politicians in the room wanted assurances that they would get patronage from President Cleveland if he won election again. And Grover Cleveland said no. Grover Cleveland went even further. He told these folks that I intend to address a letter to the public in which I shall withdraw from the ticket. I intend to explain my situation and to report what you have said to me here. I will tell the voters of the country that I cannot give any secret pledges, and that unless I do, you will not support the Democratic ticket. Then, gentlemen, you can pick out a candidate to suit you. But I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Sheehan, which was William Sheehan, the lieutenant governor. In my opinion, public indignation will show you and your organization out of sight before the end of the week. And Grover Cleveland was not one to bluff. Immediately, Richard Coker, who was with the Democratic leaders at the time, leaped to his feet and said, no, sir, we agree. No shackles, we'll support you. And they did. Grover Cleveland won New York in the election of 1892, and he had a bunch of other pickups as well from the previous canvass. He won New Jersey, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, California, all flipped in his direction. In fact, he had the largest victory since Abraham Lincoln's second in 1864, 277 to 145 in the Electoral College over Harrison. James Weaver, the populist candidate, actually won a few states, picked up 22 votes in the Electoral College, mostly out west. But this was a big sweep for the Democrats. Not only did Cleveland win, the Democrats got the majority back in Congress. He believed this was a mandate to move in his direction. Maybe so, but after a 4-year interregnum, the longest interregnum to date for an American president in between terms in office, nothing was going to be easy in his second term, but that is the story for another day. That is Grover Cleveland and an extended interregnum from the life of Grover Cleveland. For more presidential chronicles, check out my books on Amazon.com and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles.